All right, Richie Mars, Becky Lynch, and Lyra Valkaria for the Women's Intercontinental Championship. Three options. What is the most important thing coming out of this match? Becky Lynch, Lyra Valkaria, or the Women's Intercontinental Championship?
It's got to be the Women's Intercontinental Championship because that's the title that's still being established, along with Lyra being elevated by Becky Lynch. And then Becky's story is still going to be continuing onward because she already set herself up for not only continuing with Lyra potentially, but also with Bayley down the pike as well. So we'll see what happens with this match. I'm pretty excited for it just because we're still establishing this new championship, and you need challengers like Becky who have some star power in order to make the championship feel important. And even though people don't want her to see her win the championship, challengers like Becky are necessary just to add that veteran kind of landscape to it.
All right. I don't know if this is a yes or a no or whatever kind of question, but it kind of came to me as you were speaking. Can you establish a championship without it changing hands?
Uh I think so. There
Yeah.
have been championships before that have been new, and then you see as the title lineage goes on that people defer to that champion as the de facto person. For great example being the WWE World Heavyweight Championship. You had Seth Rollins, and people still point to his reign as the reign that
Yeah,
has
he's a good
like
one to
helped
kind of
that.
look at.
Uh,
Yeah.
yeah, that has established that title. Now, at the time, a lot of people didn't want him as champion because you had challengers like Finn, you had challengers like Shinsuke, who people want to see in that spotlight, other than Seth, where Seth has gotten all those moments. But Seth was the right guy to establish that championship. Lyra was the right pick for the first women's intercontinental champion. I feel like it made a different story to tell compared to the SmackDown roster when they established the United States Championship, where you had Chelsea Green as the first United States champion. So it's really solidifying that Intercontinental Championship spirit of being the workhorse kind of title.
Yes. All right. We're obviously recording this before Monday Night Raw. Do you think this is needing of a stipulation, or do you think we'll happen to get one, or what? Because we didn't have kerfuffle, but I think we had a little Becky tried cheating, poke in the eye. Like there was something that you had the ring post that was off. There was some stuff that probably could have made a disqualification. Do you think we'll get any kind of stipulation?
No, I don't think this match needs one. I
Yeah,
think
true.
in the spirit of the Intercontinental Championship, you had ladder matches, but of course, Money in the Bank ladder matches are going to be abundant on this show. We're going to have
Great
two
point.
of them.
Yeah.
So I think, like, even if it needs a stipulation, like, I wouldn't even do like a 2 out of 3 falls match yet because this is only the second match in the series
Yeah.
for the Intercontinental Championship. So I don't think this match needs a stipulation. And this is more about not only establishing the Intercontinental Championship as a valuable asset to the women's division entirely, but also solidifying Lyra, or starting to solidify Lyra as a recurring name on Monday Night Raw.
Yep. All right. Just bring it up because of timing and whatever before Monday Night Raw.
Mhm.
All right. This women's intercontinental title just feels so much more robust than the U.S. Unfortunately for Zelina, but I don't want to compare it to that. But I feel that your answer with the women's intercontinental championship being the most important thing out of the three isn't the wrong answer. I don't think there was a wrong answer, but I feel that Lyra's work has really enhanced since Becky's come back. I feel like her promos are much more stronger. Well, probably she has more to sink her teeth into, and I allude that all to kind of Becky in the days leading up, or even the hours leading up to Monday Night Raw, being like paying attention to the details, being that trusted veteran, knowing the tricks, knowing the depths of the story that they're going in advance, and then just really honing in Lyra's skills and Lyra's energy to in her promos, because she's become such a more compelling promo. Not that she was like a good or bad promo before, but she's actually getting promo time, which is enhancing the Intercontinental Championship.
Yeah, it's one of those things where it's like we've always known Lyra to be a good worker,
Yeah.
and you could see in her matches when she was the Intercontinental Champion and she did get the necessary TV time, the crowd would start off quiet, when she entered, and then during the match would be quiet. But as the match goes on, the crowd would get more and more loud and they would be more reactive to Lyra. And, Lyra was kind of starting behind the 8 ball in a lot of regards with her not only just being the first Intercontinental Champion, which is going to be huge, tremendous pressure, to begin with. But she already started off with a loss like a month after I think she won the title to Bailey in that Elimination Chamber qualifier. And that's a big thing of like the different title scenes that we have right now is with the Intercontinental Championship. They really had the advantage of this story starting after WrestleMania or at WrestleMania, wherever you want to say, at WrestleMania. And now you have a lengthy program that you could point to where it's, do you remember that Intercontinental Championship feud with this? With the United States Championship, you never really had that story established. You had Chelsea Green, who's very entertaining, but there were no stories that you could really recall off the top of your head other than potentially Meechin, but those were kind of like a series of matches and not really a full-fledged story like this one is. Because Becky and Lyra do have that history, and that history is now going to be associated with the Intercontinental Championship that they're developing. And I think because, like I said in the beginning, it's important for stars like Becky to be in these title pictures because it just kind of elevates the importance of it because this star wants this championship, depending on if they're trying to get it for their own legacy reason or to hurt Lyra in this instance is or just like trying to settle a score of never being able to defeat Lyra. There's a reason why Becky wants the Intercontinental Championship. And that's what you need with any championship story is you need the reason of why you want the championship because it seems like, oh, this person wants it just to have it.
Chelsea is when she was the US, it felt like arm candy, right? And then when you look at Lyra, she feels like the Intercontinental Championship. So, yeah.
Well,
Lyra, right? Before, like we talked about her kind of getting deeper within her character, the Intercontinental Championship is also helping with that. And it's funny because my wife, I'll use a quick example to kind of go full circle here. My wife is, I don't know, she got like a birdhouse and like got bird food and wanted me to hook it up to the window. And I was like, what are you, the bird lady? And obviously I would never call her the bird lady if people didn't call Lyra the bird lady, but now Lyra is outgrowing the bird lady. So that's just kind of where they're, hopefully my wife outgrows this bird house thing that she wants to put on the window.
Well, I mean, it's like it's a fun way to associate her to begin with, where it's just like I think she was on Chris Van Vliet and she took it in stride, where it's like she's doing all these great things, but people are just going to remember Bird Lady. But in this day and age, especially when you had like the 80s and 90s coming up, you need to have a character that somebody would associate with. And if it's something as simple as like, oh, it's the Bird Lady, even though like a lot
of feathers, Richie.
Yeah,
There's a lot of feathers.
Yeah, but it's like that's how that's how the audience could identify you if anything else, at least like who that person is. And Lyra now with the Intercontinental Championship and now having the story under her belt, no pun intended, is going to grow her and make her a more three-dimensional character, as you referred to earlier, with her getting more promo time. She's getting more of a chance to shine and become more of a performer that people want to root for.
Yep. I like this little back-to-back pay-per-view here where Becky and Lyra and the Intercontinental Championship go out here and get there. You think we'll see Bailey this night at Money in the Bank?
I think so. I think there's a great possibility of that because, with the ending stipulation, which is self-imposed, but Becky said if she wins, Lyra has to raise her hand, and if Becky loses, she can no longer challenge for the Intercontinental Championship so long as Lyra is champion. And it just kind of like raises the stakes a little bit from their previous match to something a little bit more personal. And I like with this Becky Lynch character, with her being a heel, even though it's like pretty, I wouldn't say difficult, but it is a good challenge because when Becky was heel the last time, I don't think a lot of people fully embraced it because I don't think a lot of people were really ready for her to be a heel. But with Becky, along with Charlotte, and like in those category of women who have been in that top position before, people are waiting for more women to break through. And they point to those two, and it's usually similar to the men, for the long time it was John Cena, Randy Orton, Edge, Triple H, Undertaker. And you just kind of like rearrange those names. That was the main event scene for a while. People wanted to see someone new. And with the women, we have a bunch of talented women right now. And I think this is the heaviest and healthiest scope of women that we've had in WWE in a long time, especially with the call-ups of Stephanie McCare on Raw and potentially Jordynne Grace on SmackDown. We're still a little bit early with that. And then you have new signings like Mariah May. So we're getting a lot more women. And now what they're doing with Becky is really clever in the fact that they're making some comments of her using her political power. Doesn't exist hypothetically. Well, it doesn't exist hypothetically, but it's like they're adding to the story that Becky is trying to use her star power in order to hold people like Lyra down. And I think that's a wise way to do it because, one, it garners easy heat for Becky. And at the same time, it gives people, not only just Lyra, but other people who are on the come up who will face Becky hypothetically, that it will give them more of an accomplished win if they were to beat someone like Becky. And I think that win on Backlash really did help Lyra a lot. And then you get the transition to Becky and potentially Bayley down the line because we have that Evolution pay-per-view coming up in July. So it's going to be all hands on deck. And this could be the second match in a 3-match series if they want to extend to Evolution, or potentially this is just like a stopgap where you could come back to this feud another time.
Well, if you get that 3-match thing, then with the stipulation, you would suspect Becky would have to win, unless if it's kerfuffle, right? Of course, but I don't think they would do that on a pay-per-view. I think that they're pretty decisive with their pay-per-view finishes, right? It's not Raw or SmackDown. So if there's going to be 3, I think that Becky would perhaps have to win, and then maybe it'd be like a blimp on Lyra's reign where she would lose it to Becky for 2 months or whatever, however long Evolution is, 6 weeks. And then we finally get the Bayley return in July. I don't know. I feel like we're probably going to get the Bayley versus Becky match at Evolution too, perhaps.
Well, I mean, it's just like it is a big match to have you because we haven't really had that Becky Bayley definitive rivalry that you would think we would have by now.
Yeah, we got a warm one around 2022-23.
Well, that was the one where I think they canceled the cage match or something like that, where they had to push it back a week or something.
Yeah, it was it never got to the heights that it should have.
Yeah, so it's like now here's an opportunity, not only for that, but also the roles have been rearranged, so to speak, because Bayley, after losing the women's championship, has been feeling pretty cold. When she got drafted over to that Raw transfer portal thing, still pretty cold as a character, and that's not on Bayley. That's on the situations and stories that have been written in for her.
Yeah.
And we're still trying to figure out who this babyface Bayley is, who's not the hugger. How do you describe this person who was the role model and now she's transitioning out of Damage Control? She's still kind of, I don't want to say generic, but we are still looking at what makes this Bayley babyface hit different than the ones that we've seen previously. And I think Becky is a good option to play off of because you could see in the promos with Lyra that we've seen so far, she's doing the right thing in setting up Lyra for punchlines. She's setting up Lyra for good lines to come at with promos. She's using the heel logic where it's like you could easily point out the flaws of her reasoning, but it does make sense if you look at it from her point of view. But as a heel, she's being very smug and very angry about it. So you could understand where she's coming from, but she's not doing it the correct way. And Lyra is coming off as a babyface, but not like, that squeaky clean babyface where she's like, I'm just going to give it 110%. I'm going to defeat the evil Becky Lynch. No, she's getting some zingers in there as well. And I like how they kind of played off the usual trope where you have the wrestler's wife in the front row, but in Backlash we had Lyra's fiance in the front row, who's also
that weird fiance, that weirdo fiance.
No, I didn't understand that. I'm just like, it's just a dude, guys. You gotta chill. But with Becky and Lyra, they're trying new things that you would usually see in the reversal role for if men were in this storyline,
which is good.
Yeah, and it's like it's something different, and that's what I like this feud to be. It's different. It's a different story than we're usually seeing from a women's championship feud or women's feud in general. And I think the risks that they're doing, albeit small, are working off to the story's benefit.
No doubt. All right, Richie, we're at the end here. My gut just tells me Lyra, even though I kind of want Becky, because I wouldn't mind the 3-match series. And I guess just leave Bayley, let her simmer as long as possible, in my opinion. But I feel that Lyra is kind of the win. But I just do want to kind of harp on one last thing. Becky's heel run was rejected in 2021, 2022, right? We are much deeper within this women's division and more options for the fans to clamor to. I would love to see like a Becky and Charlotte just mega bitch tag team heel just ramp up in the summer here. I think it would be awesome. So that's kind of, I wanted to get that out earlier, but I kind of forgot. But yeah, that's what I kind of want to see happen here. So floor to you. Who do you get to win in? What do you think of the old lady tag team?
I think a Becky and Charlotte tag team would be a good scenario to have if they cared about having a tag team division. It just kind of
That's
depends
the
on
thing
how
too.
they're feeling with that. Uh, with this match, I do think Becky takes it potentially because I think there's more options with Becky as champion right now than Lyra.
I don't think that's wrong either.
Yeah, and with Lyra, like you could have her kind of transition into a feud potentially with Roxanne, Liv, or Raquel, or anything like that. But
She could
again,
also do that with the IC title. I don't know if Becky and Bailey need the IC belt, but I prefer them to. Let's put it that way.
yeah, and with Lyra, like she doesn't need to leave the championship scene permanently either. You
No,
know, she could easily come back, even if it's like a triple threat match with Bailey involved, or maybe just like a Raw match where you have a stipulation like 2 out of 3 falls. You know, you could have like the big blow off right there.
that'd be a good one for Raw.
You know, and you just kind of build her up and still kind of keep her momentum. Like I feel like Lyra retaining isn't a bad option either, but I feel like there's more possibilities with Becky as the Intercontinental Champion, just based on her NXT Championship reign, where you saw her work with many different women, and I feel like Becky is one of those established names that's tailor made for the Intercontinental Championship because it helps build up other stars that you want to see get to that next level, to that next point, where we saw Becky back then with Tegan Knox, Natalia, Xia Li, like all these different talents for the NXT Women's Championship. Now you have a much more robust and filled Raw roster that you could kind of have a lot more long-term kind of matches and stories with fresher talent as well.
No doubt. All right. I'm glad we're a little split, but my heart's with Becky, so that's where I'm. I think it'd be good for the IC belt too to kind of just bounce around a little bit. All right, Richie, we'll catch you next one, buddy.
Yeah, thank you.